Welcome to Nevermind the Furthermore. Wait a minute, this music isn't right, the scene isn't right. Hang on. That's more like it. And now it's time to the show for all creatives. Nevermind the Furthermore. Your source for conversation, inspiration, and fun. With your host, Nicholas Anthony Tockert. He's an artist, a writer, a swordsman, and a game designer. He knows how to use the sword and axe in historical battles without anybody getting hurt too much. He's also the Manatee Man, master of marketing. And he may even have a guest or two. One thing, though, to be certain. Just don't call him a cryptid. With that, it's about time for the show. So sit back, enjoy, and have some coffee and chat with us.
Folks, as you can see, I'm joined by Bonzert Vocal, so we're going to skip the usual shenanigans in the morning of me rattling off everything that I do, so we can get right into him, because when I have an opportunity for a surprise guest to drop in your laps, I do enjoy doing it. I encourage you guys to watch every episode, because you may just miss something you didn't expect. Bonzert, before we get into it, for some of the newer viewers we've acquired, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good day. I am Bonzert Bokel, an author from the Netherlands and creator of the Association of Ishtar and host of the YouTube channel Radio Retro Future, known from the Steampunk Beginner's Guide. Although for some reason it's my video on Art Nouveau that everyone is watching right now. Yeah, I think that's enough for this moment.
All righty. And I adore Art Nouveau, so that's a video I will be probably reviewing just because, like I said, I adore Art Nouveau. But the reason I have Bonzert on today is double-fold. First, we were discussing at the very end of Wednesday's shows, I asked the audience, as writers of sci-fi and even fantasy, how do you balance out accuracy with aesthetic? And I like the way that was phrased. And this was brought about by it was spawned in my mind by an image Bonzert released that I was actually looking for, and I don't have, but it's of one of his agents with a very distinct firearm. And the mechanics of that firearm, because I know one of the sources and I was guessing at the other source, it was nice to know that I was accurate. Threw me for a second, and in a good way. It made me stop and look and go, but that goes there, and it made me think. It's very rare that firearms put me in that mentality. So, as not only is Bonzert one of the most prolific people I know, because through the Association of Ishtar, there's so much going on, he's also one of the most in-depth authors, in that he tends to write very solid, deep, as he would say, high concept. Would you agree with that term? Volumes.
Well, I mean, it's one of the tools that I use. Yes,
and that's meant with all praise. So I was going to ask, to open this up, what is your take on accuracy and visual accuracy, especially from a steampunk perspective? because one thing I love about the way you approach it is it's so much more, dare I say, mature and thoughtful than the if you love it, you should put a gear on it approach that so many go for.
Well, for one, I mean, my definition of steampunk is cyberpunk in the past. And I kind of like dialed up that concept with the wrench in the machine to 11
Yes, sir.
in the wrench in the machine. That literally is cyberpunk in the past. But when it comes to specifically the association of Ishtar, like, the aesthetic, it really depends on your overall. I would say it depends on your audience and the setting that you want to create. But for steampunk and games and stories in a similar vein, especially when it comes to firearms, because so many firearms are that iconic for their period. It's something that people get attached to. I mean, anyone can design a fantasy firearm with like all these elements on it that don't make sense or don't do anything but just look cool. The rule of cool. I
Absolutely.
mean, anyone can do that. That's not that hard. But for me, in particular, in a setting like the Association of Ishtar, for one, its alternate history aspect is very important to it, and there is also a certain amount of realism about the speculative nature of it, and then the details have to be correct because that's the type of audience that you want to draw in. And if you, for example, write an historical drama and let's say about the First World War, and the story you say takes place in 1914, but there is already a Mark I tank driving across the battlefield, your target audience says, wait, this is supposed to be a historical drama. Why is there a tank from 1916 driving around in 1914? And the same goes for the Second World War. And especially in the time of the internet, or like historical channels. And I
Right, right.
discovered recently this new channel, and that guy's just ripping apart all the historical errors in Call of Duty Vanguard. Some of which are very blatant, like the Sturmgewehr 44 in 1942. How do you make a mistake like that? And the Battlefield 1 had the same problem where you're looking at the game trailer and like, is this some type of diesel punk game? Because this is not World War One.
Exactly.
You say, oh well, we're a completely historical game, and then you throw in all this fantasy stuff. It doesn't work, especially in the time of YouTube, where so many YouTube channels have dedicated themselves, for example, medieval swordsmanship.
Right.
You cannot go, or you can give a Viking a two-handed sword anymore. No one is
No,
taking
no.
it seriously.
I mean, I think we've grown past the point of all Vikings have horns on
Yeah,
their
exactly.
helmets, and I do think we've fallen into a kind of bizarre drab view on history that I find actually saddening as somebody who's done some reenactment, because historically the garb people wore was so much brighter and frankly more interesting than the simply black on black on black on leather belts that seems to be running rampant through movies today.
Oh, I mean, for many people, I think that fantasy is still seen through this fantasy lens, and especially with Game of Thrones, which is all
Oh yes.
drab and like I think the two infected each other in all the wrong ways. Like you've got the dark fantasy where everything is drab because medieval ages, but then the medieval things do the same as Game of Thrones because that is popular, and they all have belts and dark clothes. So I think they
Now,
infect.
see, it is interesting that you reference Game of Thrones, because at least at the beginning of the series, before everything went to pot, essentially, because this whole winter and the undead and uprisings, the different cultures actually did dress quite differently and there's some really neat breakdowns on how that detail evolved. As you know, as things went worse, the luxuries eroded even from the background. But I just, it's one of those that now people who watch my sword show know every so often my chat / the patrons who I serve my patrons, you know, I'm essentially a YouTube warlock. I admit this freely, you know. They will ask me to review quote unquote cursed swords, many things put out by companies like Kit Ray, which subjectively look cool. They may look delightful, you know, especially if you're a 13-year-old, you know. But anybody who's handled the weapon will look at that and go, good Lord, that's more dangerous to, you know, the wielder than
It runs
the
with more
person.
risk getting injured by the weapon than, yeah. That seems to be, at least where what I've seen, that seems to be disappearing a little bit. But and especially because Lord of the Rings went for a more historical approach, and many companies, I guess, looked at that like, oh, those swords are popular now. So,
well, and that's true. Lord of the Rings did a lot for the perception of fantasy. It did, I think, do a lot to pull the muted colors down quite a bit. But most of the swords, I do personally have a hang up that so few of the elven swords have any form of guard. You know, any form of hand stop. And if you're going to stab someone with a smooth guarded weapon, you know, it's very easy to then run your hand up the weapon and do harm onto yourself. But I think
I mean, what you could do with something like Lord of the Rings is that some of those swords that they depict are ancient. So it's logical that there's like a wide variety among the designs, because they're literally from different eras of sword design.
and again, you make a point, and you could arrange where the fighting style of the sword is not thrust centric, so you're not really intended to do a stab and, you know, expect to hold. Oh well, okay. Johnny was trying to be sarcastic here, but he's actually quite accurate. I'm not asking for a guard as a block. I'm not saying Quillians or Keons, however you wish to pronounce it, or something like that. I'm simply saying a stop for your hand so it doesn't slide up the weapon as you're using it. But yeah, Subas would make sense, but I think they were afraid to put Subas. If you look at the design of the Elven Blades, especially, they are very Asian inspired, and I'm almost tempted to use an archaic term, you know, Oriental inspired, because when that was more in use, that went farther west than people think. So it went into the Middle East. They kind of lumped all that as, you know, the Far East. But if they had left Subas on, it would have suddenly turned all the elves into samurai in the eyes of a lot of the viewers. So I can see visually why they did it, but mechanically, I look at that and I go, that is a smooth grip. And things like this will pull me out sometimes, and I know it's because I've spent too much time. You know, when you study something and you know it, sometimes you have to enjoy certain types of films. You have to turn off the switch and just, you know, let yourself be immersed, and then come back into it. But for example, I advised Cindy Koepp on something she's been working on, and she was asking about weaponry from a practical thing for a fantasy setting where you have bird people and they're flying, and you have griffins, and what weapons would make the most logical sense for like griffin to griffin combat and things like that. It was a fascinating and yeah, they'd be forest ninjas, but discussion. And I'm interested because you have, because of the multiverse you run, you know, the web that the founder sits in the middle of in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You have such a spread from the extremely well equipped the agents of the Association of Ishtar, your professional troubleshooters, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
and you inversely have the scavs. And if there's one thing I love, it is the concept of scavengers making do with what they have in a fairly gritty survival style game. I personally have always loved low magic settings where, and I consider a lot of the technology I've seen in Association of Ishtar to work very much as a mirror to the low magic settings of some of the better low, in that very few people would understand the physics behind it anyway. So you get the same kind of almost practical realism from fantastic elements. And how do you balance that? Is that something you keep in mind as you're designing? Because like you said, you define steampunk as cyberpunk in the past, which is a brilliant definition. But you
For the
also are
genre, yeah.
For the genre, yes. But you are also literally the kind of person, if you want someone to define steampunk in more than a soundbite, you are basically the go-to person, or very high up there.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in your tier, you to go any more popularly known, you'd have to speak with either some very dead authors or Hayao Miyazaki, who does Studio Ghibli. That's where I see the next tier of authority on the subject. But the immediate tier down, I see you as the top of the person who really knows steampunk. And it's like, if you have goggles, why don't you occasionally wear them when you're doing
Mm-hmm.
That's one of those things that's always bothered me. The character who has goggles all the time, just once show them welding
and why on your top hat? How do you? First you got to put off your top hat, then you have to remove your goggles, then you put them on again and put your top on. Yeah.
I am that guy because it was a gift, so I will actually put out that So I will take that fireball to the chest for entertainment's sake. But yeah, no, and see, that's one of those points where I love your approach. So, do you find yourself looking at let me put this, where do you get your references from when you're creating the vehicle and the equipment lore? Because we understand the lore of steampunk is really the at least to me, and if I'm wrong, feel free to correct, but it's that mix of Victorian engineering geared towards a sense of endless exploration and the opportunity for single individuals to affect change in their lives and the lives around them. That's the hopeful core that I take out of when I look at steampunk. It's very a underdog centric.
No, I mean it really depends. I mean, most of the steampunk that I've seen does include like the richer, eccentric, working on inventions. But I mean, it's hard to generalize. Let's see. What was the core of your question? Because
the core of my question is, okay, you're building a world with canon lore.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're saying that it's hard because you don't have a lot of truly universal items, but for the purpose of discussion, the most common weapon carried by agents of the association is a type of sidearm.
Yeah.
And you're going to describe that type of sidearm. Now, where do you get your referencing? Where do you do a lot of research, or do you
Well, usually I use guns that are most common in the area around that time. So in the next book that I'm currently looking proofreaders for, and when Adventures in Responsible Dual Ownership, they used the Grasser revolver, which was popular in well, it was actually mandatory in some parts of Europe to have a Grasser revolver, which is kind of insane because that's a cavalry revolver that's compatible with the cavalry carbine. But yeah, that's it was. I forgot which country it was. One of the countries around Austria that people had to. Well, it was mandatory for them to own that sidearm. So I used that one. And Igraine herself is the main character. I hear an echo, by the way.
I'm sorry, I don't really have much I can do
Yeah,
about
I
that.
didn't hear it just now, but okay, I think it's gone now. But yeah, so I used the Grasser revolver for that one because it's just simply the most common revolver in that area around that time. And I have not in the original machine. I think the character has the Chapita Rhino-esque revolver that you asked me about,
Yes.
if I am not mistaken. But it. I imagine the Association of Ishtar requiring a very large caliber gun. However, I recently discovered another one, and I recently added it to our world anvil, which is the what's it called again? But basically, it means the M40 triple. And the M40 triple was a gun introduced by Göring of the German Luftwaffe, and it was supposed to be a survival gun, but basically it was just a gun that he gave away to his friends and aces and decorated soldiers. But it was a shotgun with a third rifle barrel.
I am familiar with that.
Yeah.
Kelly.
So I introduced that that gun, as it were. Only except then it's the triplet, because it's now a French gun, introduced by the heads of the military cybernetics ministry. So that's kind of like how it.
Okay. No, I find the sourcing, because for raw aesthetics, the late 1700s to right turn of the century, 1900s, basically before firearms went so box magazine ubiquitous, were so fascinating. You things like the Lamont revolver with, I want to say it had a shotgun as a center.
I actually have a drawing of an associate with the carbine version of that.
And the volcanic pistols and things like this. I find, because I am still very much personally a victim of my aesthetic, in that I understand that there may be more practical options even in real life that one may modernly pursue, but I just can't get over something that just looks cool and has an engineering quirk. I understand the operation moderately well of the traditional semi-automatic firearm as most people know it. It's not that complex for the action on a semi-automatic pistol or rifle. But when you look at in things like the way a tubular fed lever action rifle, the way the bullet is moved through, it just lends itself to neat aesthetics and interesting solutions to problems that make other problems, so that you can then make your own in-world solutions to. So, for example, when you have a lever-action rifle, if it has a side port, instead of having your character carry something like the traditional box magazines, or just loading round by round, you could have them carry a long, essentially tubular clip that they just speed load a whole the whole load of the firearm into, and then drop it, or it could be even incorporated into a melee weapon. And because the past has these problems that modern engineers have chosen to bypass, well, we're just going to do it this way. No, we've lost the opportunity for the creative solutions to the older problems, rather than simply forsaking the whole system. And I find that it's an area that requires mental flexibility. It's sort of like what the reason messers became popular was in part because there was a ban on who could own swords, but swords were defined as something with a pommel. So if you had a knife, you were fine, but there was no blade length regulation on the knife. So and this is one of my kicks, and I don't know if things like that creep into your universe intentionally or not.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The how people work around the legalism to get what they want in any aspect. I mean, this is the same. Oh, only government forces could have propeller craft, but civilians can still have their dirigibles. That's fine. I'm just going to have a jet engine on the back of my dirigible, or a one-time use rocket I can plug in, launch, and then jettison to get somewhere very quickly if I need to. And that mentality, I think, is important for building better fiction.
Yeah,
because
matter of fact, for the period, the interwar period, Germany did a lot of that stuff. Like, oh, we're not allowed to have this type of planes. Well, but we can have glider planes. So a lot of the planes they developed were actually developed off of glider planes, and many of their pilots were glider plane enthusiasts for that reason. And there's all this type of stuff. Tanks were actually tractors, things like that. So they did a lot of stuff like that. One famous weapon like that from the Middle Ages is the Guten Tag, which was similarly developed to, we're not allowed to have spears, but we're allowed to have a staff with a pin in it. So that's basically how that came to be.
Exactly. And it's funny because it's going on, that mentality, and is what's is still going on today. For example, the Japanese Defense Forces, they are not allowed to have aircraft carriers. To this day, they are not allowed to have aircraft carriers.
Well, yeah, but by their own laws. But I think they revoked that recently.
Well, what they do have are surprisingly flat-topped destroyers. So they have small flat-top destroyers, and have really doubled down on developing attack drones. So they don't have aircraft carriers, but they have something that functions like that. And I live for that.
Well, I can actually name you. I can actually name you two examples from my own universe. One of them is the book I'm working on right now, Casket Girls, which I'm still writing. Has a project that, like, the governments have agreed that they're not allowed to use Rift-related technologies. I need a better word for that. I don't know what to call it yet, but they're not allowed to use technology that's acquired on other worlds,
right,
to maintain the balance of power. And the exception is the French penal legions, but they're especially made to fight outsider incursions. So they have like this heavy experimental machinery, like the chassis de bataille, the battle frames.
Right.
And but however, they are developing things that are not allowed to develop, and that's actually one part of the subplots of the upcoming book, where they are working with heavy cybernetic augmentation to control these machines. Um, and
I just
another example that I'm working on, which is Koepp, the big company. They're not allowed to have a mechanized security force.
Mhm.
So what they've done instead is that there is this group, a bunch of eccentrics who call themselves um, the Knights of Avalon. They want to kind of like bring back the knightly orders. However, they have developed these mechanical suits, and but they need the mechanical help of Koepp because they can make microprocessors.
Ah,
So, and they're the only ones who can, which is also a reference to the current state of where, because I live in the Netherlands and we are the only ones who can enable the production of microprocessors. I mean, the microprocessors themselves are made in Taiwan, but they're made with Dutch technology.
ah.
Um, yeah,
No,
so
see that's oh I, that is the kind of detail, because a lot of people will DM me and they'll ask, questions like, how do I become a better writer?
Mhm.
Or are these very broad, you know, that it's too broad to answer that way. So I keep looking for these pieces that people can understand. And then I go to people who I consider holding expertise, especially in that sort of field. And world building with mechanical depth. And when I say mechanics, I don't just mean the devices we're discussing, but from a game builder design, system, you have a lot of mechanical depth. There's things happen for a reason, and you have an in-world reason. It's why, as terrible as it is to say it, it's why the technobabble in Star Trek usually makes a bit more sense than the technobabble in Doctor Who, because it may not make any sense, but they're consistent. You hear the same device doing roughly the same thing, and for the diehards, you can look up the fictional schematics and stuff, so it feels real and consistent. Where in Doctor Who, which I love, anything could be anything almost very quickly, because it's far more of a science fantasy series than a science fiction series in my mind. And I'm not bashing Doctor Who in any way, shape, or form, at least not the classic Doctor Who. But we are both at the halfway point, and I do have to make sure that this episode cuts off at 11 o'clock my time, because I don't. Anita's coming back to Raging 2, and I want to give everyone a chance to be there and welcome her back now that C. Michael Lanning's doing much better. So that's why I normally have people on Wednesdays when I plan guests. But with that, I want to give you an opportunity, because we were talking before the show about some of the projects you've got coming out, and some of the materials you're coming out. And yes, yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Doctor Who is a sci-fi fairy tale. That really is a good encapsulation. But usually people come on right as something is launching or right before it launches to build the hype, etc. And a lot of times I do that is because there are a lot of people out there who will say they're writing a book and not finish. But I have faith in Bonsard enough, which is a rare thing, that if he says, I'm working on this project, I want to know about it as early as possible to start talking it up, so that we can discuss it. Now, he did send me images. However, because I am streaming part of the reason we were having problems was I was trying to upload the images, and my system will not currently allow me to put the new images up. So I'll use them when I'm discussing what Bonzert's up to in future stuff. But Bonzert, please talk about what's going on with Bound for the Sticks, and your STLs, and you have so much coming down the pipe that I think people would be interested in.
Yeah, so my first book was Wrench in the Machine. Since then, I created 2 new anthologies, and Bound for the Sticks, which I hope to be done mid-May. It's already backed on Kickstarter, and then I hope to send them all out to the people. I have a new web store now, sponsored at gumroad.com. The link is on associationofishtar.com, and it will have all the ebooks. I'm planning to put the paperbacks there on as well, and it will be cheaper for you to buy them there, and you can also buy them in bundles. So and we also have the STL files, so you can print your own miniatures at any size that you want, like this miniature by of Nier, which is one of the characters from Bound of the Sticks. What else? So those are done. Those are finishing up. We're working on the final illustrations for Bound for the Sticks, and then it should be ready for print. And then of course I want to do when the distribution is done, I will start up a new Kickstarter page. I just don't know yet exactly what I'm gonna market on there. But I'll let Nick know so he can share the link. Because what I'm actually working on a bunch of shorter books. The first one is Anwin, Adventures in Responsible Doll Ownership. I'm really looking forward to that one. I'm still looking for some proofreaders to give some feedback on that. I've got one proofreader and he's loving it. So yeah, which is about a girl, Igraine. This is Igraine right here. And he has a doll called Enwin, not included with this model, unfortunately. However, that doll has come alive, and now she has to take care of it while also being a secret agent for the Association of Ishtar. So that's one. That's one is done. That's right now in the proofreading phase. Then I'm working on the Casket Girls, which is a more military about penal troops fighting outsiders. However, they're also being used as experimental weapons units, so they also have to deal with that issue. And of course, the Association of Ishtar also has an opinion on that. So, there's also a bit of intrigue going there. And I've decided to split that one up in 2 parts, because after this, I want to do the Knights of Avalon, which is a group of eccentrics who want to be knights, and they have these special suits that they want to use to fight the outsiders with. However, they need the help of Uther Koepp, so and they also need legitimacy. So Uther Koepp, and I didn't get to finish that, takes them on as a fumigation unit. And that's why they need hazard suits,
Right.
So
it's fumigation. No, and see, that's exactly that. Oh, it's so good. I love the little mischievous, the best compliance is malicious compliance. That feeling of, okay, these are the rules. I'm playing by the letter of the rules. Is this going to work? And the give and take, because it's one of those ongoing aspects of the manifestation of power versus the ongoing innovation of just people, and it makes for good reading. Right now, pulling you, since we have people should be following you first off, but since we have you, and we usually put you in the author's seat, tell us about how you write, tell us about how you create, X, Y, and Z. I'd like to take and put you on the other side of the desk for a moment and ask, what, because I want to say Neil Gaiman basically said, read everything if you want to be a better writer, and read this and look at it. And he gave a wonderful list about it. It's going around in meme format. We really should see it. What do you read that you find inspires and moves you, and what are the traits in the material you take in that you feel the other creators out there should lean into? Because it's not just what you like, but what moves you in a story, what aspects do you wish people knew more about for yourself as a reader?
Well, I'm dyslexic, so I don't read.
Well,
I listen to audiobooks. I
I'm
watch a
actually
lot of
dyslexic
movies.
too. I count film as literature because I run the subtitles, so I'm trying to read it too. Audiobooks are literature, which you have a new audiobook out, don't you? Or is it
Yeah, Bound for the Sticks is already available as an audiobook. That's correct. On I think about every audio platform like Audible.
wonderful? Because I do a lot of audiobooks because I can.
Yeah, Bound for the Sticks
multitask.
is available for credits on Audible. So and I'm dying to receive some reviews. So
We'll have to. I'll promote that around. We'll see if we can't get some ears
yeah.
on that. Happy Friday, Syndicate. But that okay. So even in audio format, what do you find?
Well, mostly non-fiction.
Okay.
I noticed that I am more engaged by history than by fiction. And yeah, that's where I also get my stories ideas from. Is from history. And old movies, noir in particular, western. So yeah, that's where I get most of my inspiration from. Is from movies and history.
Okay. No, it's just fascinating because I realize I talk to a lot of authors, a lot of creators, a lot of artists, and we're so focused on what they produce. I was raised, and one thing my father taught me was if you want what someone has, you have to do what they do to some extent. So realizing that from a perspective, I find myself wondering, okay, as a creative, what media are you leaning into that inspires and promotes you? And the fact that your response is, well, history is delightful because it's a very American idea that I totally disagree with. But this misapprehension that history is somehow boring or isn't is a waste of time, which is far worse. And to say yes, the best fiction is written from the perspective of someone who is reading the history of different periods and gleaning tropes, and that might be the part of the secret to why your worlds have such a feel of realism, because you've taken seeds from reality, actual events, at least as objectively as history does preserve, and puts them out there. And it's just it's fascinating because the last time we heavily talked, it's been quite some time, we got into a delightful discussion on pole weapon tactics. And I love seeing how when one analyzes the tactics and the strategies deployed in historical combat, it still is very valid in fictional settings, and it makes it feel very very real. It's funny how many rebel fighter groups that are well written move and track a lot like Saladin did. And when you start looking at the people who are in the role, so if you're writing about a siege and you want to know about sieges, reading about historical sieges, it seems like such a logical jump, but I think so few people are willing to get out there and just either deliberately or for enjoyment do research and let that kind of trickle in. So hearing that from you both encourages me, and it intrigues me, because when you have different historical events and periods, it fascinates. Now, Kelly Carlisle has a comment here, and you two are in a neighborhood of writing styles. She's much more pulpy than you tend to be, but her book that I guess I count as a beta reader at this point, The Rembrandt Stratagem, is very much, like I said, how steampunk technologies can be on that mirror of low fantasy. A high concept, mind you, but low fantasy. Her stuff is on the other side of that. So it's almost an absolute value away from center that steampunk is in the direction of technology, if that makes sense. But she says, "Sponsored, I love all the wonderful projects you're doing. I wish I had time to be part of it currently. Love being on your show, and I'm still getting book sales. Keep up the great work." And that's one thing I love seeing. I love hearing when
wish I could say the same. I'm still waiting for those book sales to pick up.
Well, that's a good part of why we're here, because these shows tend to be fairly evergreen, and people will come back, especially when I get back and I change the title around, because I didn't know when I set up the show that I was going to have a Friday guest. And Cindy Koepp is putting all sorts of wonderful links in the chat, as she does. I won't be highlighting them because I'm going by guest protocols. But please, if you're following the chat, go through Cindy Koepp's links. But so you write a good deal. You write steampunk almost exclusively, to the best of my knowledge. Have you written any nonfiction work, any analysis of historical from your perspectives or anything like that?
Well, mostly essays for my own video series. Yeah, I just never could get into reading, writing historical fiction myself. But I do love talking about history. But I don't know. I'm not compelled to write like historical stuff. I usually do that already in my steampunk things.
Well,
and with my essays, I already talk about history itself. So, but yeah, I would love to make like history, like videos about history, and in particular stuff in relation to what's important to steampunk. The events that inspire me, the historical figures that inspire me. But yeah, that's kind of like already what I'm doing in the Wrench in the Machine. I talked about the West Africa Squadron, which probably one of those things that have been completely erased from the historical zeitgeist. Yeah. And on my website, the Association of Ishtar, I also have a store. So
I find myself listening to this. I see two big opportunities for you that perhaps you haven't contemplated. First and foremost, obviously, the doll needs to be merchandised at where someone can buy the blood. I mean, that's an obvious play. But I was thinking, you have written and you've discussed so much on what is steampunk, the history of steampunk as a genre and as a lifestyle. It seems to me that with all the notes you must have, it wouldn't be much effort to compile them into a volume and see, put that out on a print on demand service like Amazon and simply see if that would go, because you have when you have one thing I tell people, because I have a lot of people who they want to write, they'll go, I don't know what to write about. And it's like, you write volumes on your social media every day about, whatever your personal interest is. Literally just cut and paste that into a document and then, start formatting and tweak it. I think with the given huge bulk of, it really authoritative discussion on steampunk, again, its origin and everything, it's almost tragic that you haven't taken all that material and simply formatted it into a volume, so that, because there have to be people who go, what is steampunk? And instead of just finding your videos, they could see an Amazon link to what is steampunk by Bonzert Bokel. And I think that might actually sell possibly to an expanded universe. Because, one of the things I love, I was just thinking, one of the things I love most about steampunk is very often it feels like the interwar period.
Yeah.
And it's kind of almost embarrassing to me. I loved mummy movies growing up. I loved mummy movies. It's something my wife and I agree on. But I realized I wasn't attached to ancient Egypt. I was attached to the period, that, especially that interwar period, where Egyptology was being born, and there was all this intrigue and excitement and all the lore. So it's not the ancient aspect that caught me. It's this timeline that really was the sort of the origin of a great many of the pulp adventures. And thinking about that, just that angle literally just hit me, because I glanced up at some, my wife got me Rick O'Connell from The Mummy as one of those pups. And I looked over and went, a little mid-conversation, I'm an audio processor. It dropped in. I'm like, well, there you go. There's a movie that, that has tremendous potential to be in that area where steampunk and pulp overlap. But since so many people love steampunk for the aesthetic, but often get lost at that very shallow level, I really do think there's an opportunity there. And, ask around, obviously. Ask some of the people. Just put it on your Discord. Should you compile your assorted essays? I really think that would be a volume that would not only be of use, but if you combine that with perhaps a basic guide to how you make your props and things, your costuming and props, that would preserve a lot of the knowledge that you carry. The mentality I'm talking about is what got me into writing The Simple Sword, where I was like, I've done so much in this field, I need to find a way to sort of preserve it, because in part we are all faced with our own mortality, and there's no reason why I shouldn't profit from it. And I see that for you too.
I started on writing some ideas for it, but one of my issues with it that I never really I could formulate a proper question on what the central what the central premise of that book should be. But I guess I could just also compile a bunch of blogs that I've written on the topic and bundle them.
Well, I see. Kelly comes in, and she's steampunk is greatly misunderstood and miswritten. Bonsert's knowledge about the subject is so helpful to me in the universe I'm building, and that's part of it. It's like if somebody is on a program right now, I'm just under 300 subscribers, by the way. I would really like to try to get over that number. So at least both my channels are on that level. But if you're getting that from a narrow sampling audience and you're getting this deep of a passion, you really should consider just a very basic, what is steampunk? Because I think you have been so immersed in the concept and the universe, and it's really shaped your life, that it's become as natural as breathing to you to think with that perspective, to see with that aesthetic. And when someone is falling in love with it, but they don't know, oh, well, then thank you. I've gone up a few since I checked last night. That's incredible. See, having Bonsard on was my local, was my good luck charm. Thank you.
No, you should add my name to the description. I see Wind Dark. That's one of my guys. Hello, Spanner Rider.
I am someone who listens to Watches Bonsard's YouTube channel, got deeper into steampunk as a concept of what was presented there. And I know I still have a lot to learn. I would certainly reach out for Bonsard. I want to reach out for a Bonsard written book on the subject. Well, I think the audience might be agreeing with me a little bit, my friend.
Maybe I can start with just bundling some of the essays.
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't have to be complex in origin. If you just bundle the essays and add some related imagery where appropriate, it literally becomes a matter of likely just formatting it and putting it out.
Yeah, let me see how. Because I've got a Patreon.
Yes.
Let's see how much. I right now I'm getting $90 a month, and that's actually gone up thanks to the same Wind Dark that recently supported us.
Thank you, Wind Dark.
Yeah, maybe I can make it a goal on there or something.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, to get some people active on my Patreon, because I recently it's tax season at the moment in the Netherlands, and my tax advisor is warning me that I cannot keep putting on losses on my tax returns. So I really need to up my my income.
And that's why sometimes you have to diversify a little bit. And if you do something like this, it should start the gestalt of the people who will come and read, even a do it as a small volume book, just an introduction, the Bonsard Vocal introductory guide to steampunk or something like that. That's going to, when people read that's going to interest them more in your fiction. The people who read your fiction are more likely to go through that, and both will be talking about it more. So we're finding things to that. Now we're getting to the last minute of the broadcast or so. So where can people best find you? Where do you want people to reach out to?
We have a website called associationofishtar.com. There are all the links to my radio Retro Future YouTube channel, and of course all my books. We have a new store there. We've got new STLs for our miniatures if you want to get them printed for your own games, or maybe you just want a nice statue. So I don't know, but they are excellent. Pretty deep printing. We also have bookends, which you can see all the way behind me. So yeah, buy my shit and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I also have a Patreon and a subscribe star for people who want more regular stuff. And if you subscribe to the associationofishtar.com, you'll also get updates of my new stories. A new story should be going up today. And this Sunday, we have a special stream where we're going to talk about the submission rules for the Association of Ishtar, and we'll also be talking about things like how to write high concept and write high for the Association of Ishtar with Peter Knight, who's kind of like become my new co-host on the show.
Oh, wonderful.
So yeah, he also I think he's very similar to what Kelly writes. So yeah, and steampunk is more than steam. So
yes, that's a great thing, I think, to kind of wind down on.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on. I will be running your ads, of course, throughout next week, and I usually rotate through them. I try to bring up the ads of the people who are actively doing something right now, more than the you have to keep it fresh. But
do you stream on Sunday?
I do not stream on Sundays.
Okay. And I'll be streaming. So
excellent. With that, I will let's see, it's Friday. I will be back on the Historical Fencing Guild, my other channel, at 8 p.m. for the Historical Fencing Guild's live stream. We've got a lot to talk about over there, Sword, and we're going to start the updates on how we're fixing the facilities, which may not be exciting for the writers around here, but for the folks who come out to Sword Fight, it's a big deal. And I'm going to start doing some new things over there. Probably Saturday, I will be doing another art stream. Unfortunately, that show is a little more randomized because family needs on weekends. And then I will be back here Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central for you folks a little farther out in Indiana for another episode of Nevermind the Furthermore. Please, folks, keep creating, keep writing, keep drawing, because once it's out there, you can always edit it, you can improve it, but you can't edit a blank page. And I will see you all very soon. Have a great day.